to look at this statement coming from Gumi. Of course, we all know what Gumi stands for in Nigeria. Once you mention that name, Gumi, we are talking about someone who advocates for negotiation between government and bandits. But this time around, he's at it again. He's saying, just like NAIJA militants teach bandits have to live in peace. This is coming from a Twitter handle that goes by the name of Parallel Facts. He said, teach bandits how to live in peace, just like NAIJA militants. Gumi. Let me quickly correct this erroneous impression before we go further, that you cannot compare NAIJA militants with bandits. These are two parallel lines that cannot come together. This is not far-fetched. The NAIJA militants were actually fighting for a fair share of the resources domiciled in their region by God. I could recall that in the time of Yar'Adua as a government, before the amnesty program, federal government of Nigeria tried without success to tag militants terrorists. The world, UN, US, UK refused to agree with Nigerian government that they are terrorists because they knew they were fighting for injustice against the region. Even as we speak, Ogoni is perhaps the most polluted place in the whole world as we speak. And all the efforts of federal government under the last administration of Muhammadu Buhari to clean up Ogoni ended in a political gimmick. If you want to clean up Ogoni, you are looking at a solid 25 years with a reasonable billions of dollars. So, as far as I'm concerned, there is no similarity between banditry and militancy in the northern part of the country. The best bet, the treatment that should be given to bandits is very clear. That is exactly what came from a former governor of Kaduna State, talking about Malam Nasir El-Rufai, who made it clear that bandits do not repent, that the best treatment to give to bandits is to disallow them, send them to their creator who have the ultimate power to judge them. As far as I'm concerned, I think the best advice that should be coming from someone like Gumi, of course, who we understand was a former military personnel, should be to encourage federal government to synergize with state governments and local governments to acquire monopoly of currency power, spot the bandits out of their hiding places, set them running, and bring them to justice. I want to say that it is disheartening, hearing even recently how a bandit leader was even threatening that if you invade their camps, kill any of them, that more bandits will arise, will rise up. I want to say that that is an empty threat, and I want to encourage federal government to continue in the trajectory of bombarding them, and the trajectory of acquiring more weapons to fight them. You can understand that even before the election of 2023, Gumi was very vocal that his followers should not vote for any person that will acquire more arms to fight bandits. As we have it, federal government has since placed an order for about 50 fighter jets. I must say it's a welcome development. As far as I'm concerned, bandits need to face the wrath of the federal government. That's why I'm particularly pleased with the current approach of security arrangement, which will allow the state governments to take charge of security in their various localities. Talking about the forest guard. Because I understand that the federal government have since directed the states to start recruiting personnel between 2,000 and 5,000, depending on their financial capacity. And the state governors before now have acknowledged that they now get more money as a result of policies of federal government, talking about subsidy removal on gasoline and unification of efforts at the official window. So hence, that money is in their pocket. They should use part of it to address this issue of insecurity. But as far as I'm concerned, life is sacrosanct. The best approach to securing life and property is through coercive power. And I want to even talk to Gumi himself, that the way it is, he is himself a cleric in the north. And we all know the role of clerics. Because we are looking at a situation where part of what the problem of insecurity we have in the northern part of the country have to do with ideology. Because at some point, they made us understand that Boko Haram means Western education is sin. So how did we get here? That someone in the north, as a child, will grow up to believe that Western education is sin. And the person can take up arm based on that ideology. So that is where people like Sheikh Gumi have failed in their responsibility to educate their children from the cradle. Understand that in the northern part of the country, they give serious attention to Islamic knowledge. I don't have issue with that because it is a way of life, it's a belief. But the question is, why not as you acquire that Islamic knowledge, talking about the leaders and stakeholders in the north and the governments in the north, whether state or local governments, why not as the children acquire that Islamic knowledge and let them acquire Western education side by side with that? Because if you do that, certainly you'll be developing the human capital of the region. And they cannot contribute meaningfully to the Nigerian project in terms of revenue base. Understand that under the last administration, the former administration of Goodluck Jonathan, he started an emergency school, start building it in different areas of the north. But unfortunately, when a Muhammad Buhari asked a Jonathan out of office, did not jettison the idea, and today we are back to the same problem that a Jonathan government could have solved. But the question is, why did the northern stakeholders, governors, local government chairmen not took that advantage and continue in that trajectory? It's going to show that perhaps the northern stakeholders are not interested in educating their children. Perhaps all their interest is to ensure that they leave them uneducated so that they can be easily micromanaged and, of course, as to have it subjugated. But I think that best explains the reason a man, an individual will come, give orders, give directive, everybody will continue to obey. People have no sense of independence in their thinking. And I note with serious concern the recent complaint from some other stakeholders that the out-of-school children in the north is rather caused by federal government. I begin to wonder, why should somebody be thinking in that direction in this 21st century? We understand that actually the responsibility of training Nigerian child rests with the three tiers of government. Talking about the federal, the state, and local government. However, what belongs on government to do is the funding and policy direction. And this they do for the 36 states without exception. So the question is, why is it that we don't see as much as out-of-school children in the north? Why is it that we don't see that in the south? That's a big question to answer. And another major issue is, why should we be seeing as much as 67%, 50-something%, 40-something%, 30-something% out-of-school children in a state? You are talking about children within the age bracket of 6 and 16 years. And you are saying 60-something% of that age bracket is not in school. I must say that this is a recipe for crisis. These are potential Boko Haram members who are breeding. These are potential bandits who are breeding. There's no better way to explain it. And in some cases, this percentage translates into more than 1 million people. And you are questioning, how did we get here? Because recently, the governors of our state acknowledged that some of the bandits are people who come from their state, who they know their origin. So it boiled down to the fact that the leaders, the stakeholders, the parents did not do their work at the right time to educate the people, the children, on the right path of life. Because if you look at it from the psychological point of view, it's very clear. Psychology sees the newly born child brain as a tabula rasa, a clean slate, on which the caretaker writes anything he or she wishes to write. So the question is, by the time you are the parents, the guardian, the stakeholders, refuse to write the norms of the society into the child from the cradle, of course, bandits, Boko Haram, and certain terrorist members will help you to write their own value system. I think that is part of the consequence we all now face. Because the issue of security has since become a national issue. Hence, we can see federal government budgeting heavily and spending heavily to address it. Even in time of former President Muhammad Buhari, at a point, the federal government withdrew $500 million from excess crude to buy Tucano jets. I think about 12 Tucano jets then. And currently, we are seeing federal government placing an order for about 50 fighter jets. I want to say that this money that could have been used to develop other areas of human endeavor in the country. We have issue of healthcare, yes, the issue of health sector begging for attention in terms of funding. We can clearly see caregivers, clearly see doctors, in most cases, threatening to go on strike. We saw the one that happened in Abuja recently. We clearly have the educational sector begging for attention in terms of funding. We have the road infrastructure begging for funding. We have even to develop our power sector to be able to have a sustainable power supply, begging for attention in terms of funding. We have the production sector begging for attention in terms of funding. We have even the agricultural sector begging for attention in terms of funding. And here we are spending billions of naira, at times dollar, in fighting insecurity. That is why the stakeholders in the north must rise to the occasion and do the needful. But on the angle of those who are already terrorists, who are already bandits, I think the best option to deal with those ones is for the government to acquire monopoly of coercive power, smoke them out of the hiding places, set them running and bring them to justice. The ones that need proper education are the ones from the cradle, the ones that have not yet been radicalized, so that they don't become vulnerable to be radicalized. Because if you leave them uneducated, of course, you make them vulnerable to be radicalized, to be used by bandits, as you see currently. Well, at some point in the history of Nigeria, in recent time, we equally saw how children could be used for suicide bombing. That couldn't have happened if the child is allowed to acquire education and know what is right and what is wrong. But because they are not given the opportunity to acquire education, that is why anything you tell them and you just use religion to paint it, they accept it. I must say the northern stakeholders, governors, must rise to the occasion and address that lacuna. Because the insecurity we hitherto here happen in the north is already here with us in the south. You got to show that it's no longer a regional problem. It's a national problem. That is why even as stakeholders in the southern part of the country, everybody must put pressure on the northern stakeholders to do the needful. That's why I'm particularly worried that I'm not seeing enough energy, enough zeal from the northern governors, particularly those estates that are ravaged by the essence of Fulani militants. Talking about states like Zamfara, Katsina, Plateau, Benue, jumping at the idea of forest guard. Because for me, it's the way to go. I've been a very strong advocate that the state governors should not just be going by the governors and the chief security officers that respective states, but rather that should be allowed to parade some level of security power. And I want to believe that this forest guard has come to give them that advantage and opportunity to take charge. Because recently we saw the governor of Zamfara State coming out to say that in his capacity as a governor, he has been able to acquire some level of technology to enable him know the movement and location of bandits. But what is lacking is the ability to command the security architecture in his state to move them to action and operation. I want to believe that this trajectory, this have provided that avenue for him to take charge. So I don't know why they are still waiting. And we can clearly see bandits coming to negotiate and releasing those who are held hostage. I'm not saying that those who are held hostage should not be released, but what is happening is exposing Nigerian government, whether the state government or the federal government, as a weak sovereign state. Because the way it is, a bandit that come and negotiate fully armed, still go back or went back to his camp, still armed, is a recipe for crisis. It's like postponing the evil days. The only way you can do this is to think out of the box. That is why I was particularly happy when we saw the arrest of leaders of Ansaru terrorist group. Of course, we understand that one of them have been convicted and sentenced for, of course, illegal possession of arms and illegal mining. And they are waiting for a larger one that will come about through terrorism. And the way it is, it's a welcome development because the people or will be terrorists, will be bandits, will now see that somebody can be arrested and prosecuted. So that could now act as a deterrent to others. Because I want to say that since we started fighting bandits or banditry, or rather terrorism, this is perhaps the first time we are seeing someone being put on trial, being prosecuted for terrorism. I must say it's a welcome development. And I want to encourage government to continue that trajectory. But personally, any area of success we see coming against bandits, terrorism, kidnapping, we acknowledge it. Whether I come from the police, whether I come from the military, whether I come from the DSS, whether I come from the locals, we encourage it. We acknowledge it. Because the best approach to fighting this is synergy, particularly with the locals. I must say I'm particularly pleased with some level of course, achievement by the locals. We saw the one that happened in Delta State, Nabraka to be precise. Another one happened in Ogwachuku by the locals. We saw the one that happened in Kwara about 2 times. We saw the one that happened in Katsina. So we are happy when we see such things happening. But again, I want to particularly acknowledge the opinion of the Director General of DSS, Ajayi, who at some point advised that the communities should be empowered to be the first line of defense in case of invasion. And I want to believe that in a way that may have helped shape the mind of the president in arriving at the conclusion that forest guard is the way to go, and that at some point he needs to give energy to state police. Because for me, the intelligence that is needed to fight insecurity lies with the locals. Hence, all crime is local as it has been established. But let me say very thank you for your time. This is Mr.